This video is looking at how we can develop search terms that will be used to complete a literature review. Within this video, I will consider the role of a soft search in developing search terms, how the results from the soft search can be used to generate a table of commonly used keywords, how we would group those keywords, define the groups we've established, and calculate the frequencies of the keywords which we've acquired. As an example, I will be using the hypothetical search, is transferring or manual handling patients bad for healthcare professionals' backs? The process is going to be looking at some examples from a soft search, making a table presenting the keywords that are used in the articles, a note of the year in which the article was published, and grouping of similar terms. So to start this process, what I did was I went and I just used Google Scholar and I looked for articles that had anything to do with this theme of transferring a patient from one bed to another or manual handling of a patient, and if there was any link towards a healthcare professional's back. The first article that I found was looking at transferring a patient between a bed and a stretcher. You can see that this was published in 2017 and that there was 3 keywords that were presented underneath the abstract. And although I say keywords, notice that in 2 of these instances there are 2 words as part of the key ones, so perhaps I should be using something like key terms as a phrase. But essentially at this point I'm not worrying about what's included in the abstract, I'm not worried about anything like how many people were involved or any of the results that are presented. I'm just looking and saying, is this approximately the sort of theme that I'm looking for? And when this article was published, what year was it? Is it in a reasonable journal? And what are the key terms? And if it's in a reasonable journal and approximately in line, then I will store that data and I'll move on to the next study. So the next study I found, again, reputable journal, 2007, bed to wheelchair and wheelchair to bed, so it's still manual handling, and we have a wider range of keywords that's actually been presented this time. So again, I store these. Moving on, I found an article looking at nurses' work-related musculoskeletal disorders. Back pain is a musculoskeletal disorder. It's published 2015, and so a nice range of keywords which I can once again store. Slightly older article this time, you can see we're coming back to 1995, but again, manual handling activities, low back pain, once again in nurses this time. And remember, I didn't specifically look for nurses, this is just what came when I started to look in this general area. It's a soft search, and soft search, as you can see, is not following a very strict search criteria. It's just a quick look to see what's out there and to find evidence for things like these keywords you can see listed at the bottom. Now you'll notice in this instance I had to actually download the PDF. When I went to the website and I looked at the first screen similar to what I presented in the previous articles, keywords didn't appear. And I didn't just give up at that point. I downloaded the PDF and saw the actual article, and I did manage to get some keywords here. And that's particularly useful because then I can add this to the mix. Similar situation with the next article that I found. Again, repositioning aids, patient weight, biomechanical stresses, patient's bed. Different title, and that's the benefit of this soft search, is that I'm not being trapped by a really specific search. I'm just looking for things in this general area. And I've got a good range of keywords, again, that I can extract. Moving on, I found another article here, absolutely in line with what we're looking at, implications of bed height during nursing tasks, and a good range of keywords. Next article, repositioning, so a different word we're seeing in the title again, 2017, so we're back in reasonably recent articles, and a good range of keywords. 2008, we're seeing handling techniques, disability, back injury, all that sort of general theme that we wanted to see with our rough idea, and a nice range of keywords that we've got again. 2020, very recent article here, evaluation of patient transfer tasks, with and without a transfer belt in this time, so it's a different type of transfer, but it's still transferring a patient and it's still looking at that process. We've got a Different range of keywords again here, so it gives us something else to think about. And then the final article which I found in here, we're looking at low back pain, nurses, and you're seeing keywords presented at this point here. So the first thing I've done after finding these articles is I've popped these into Excel. You can see that what I've just presented to you is 10 articles. Obviously I went through them quite quickly. If you wanted to find those articles, feel free to play the video back and pause at the point so you can make note of the indexes, the citations, the authors, and so on. I've organised these here, and I've done this in two ways. First, I did this chronologically, so you can see that I've gone from 1995, not a huge amount then, until 2007, and then I've gone forward to 2021. That would be useful later on when I was looking and thinking what period of time should I search as part of my literature review. So I can certainly look and see if there's been any other literature reviews that have been published, and perhaps I would focus on anything published after that review. If no other review had been done, then I would consider whether I wanted to go back into the 90s because this is the last I saw, or whether I would say perhaps 2007 seems to be producing a reasonable amount, and so I could do a deeper search, perhaps going on from 2007. I then looked back at the keywords which were under each of those abstracts, and I tried to organise these just in things that looked approximately similar. So I haven't been 100% strict on any rule. I've just made an effort to say things look similar, and when there is something that's an article that's got two very similar words, for example nursing and nursing systems, I've put those together. For example, over here we had EMG or electromyography and electrogoniometry. I popped those together as well. It's worth taking the time to quickly tidy up that table to make that more presentable. You may find that you want to include this as a supplement or as an abstract, as an appendix. And so taking a moment just to quickly add some nice borders and to emphasize the actual lines can make things look much more pleasing and improve the visual impact. The next step was I took the time to look and say each of these groupings that I've done, so I've tried to say these are similar words or they seem similar to me. If I actually had to describe each of those categories, how would I do that? And so my thoughts were that this first patch of keywords seemed to be about a process, transferring a patient, repositioning, a movement, handling, workload. And so generally the way I've done this has been about processes. The next group seems to be about tools, whether that's an analytical tool or a physical tool. Then most of these were about a tool. I could possibly then say, looking at these categories, the low-tech patient transfer assistive devices possibly could have been better suited to this group, but I'm not going to worry too much about that. The next column here, we're having words like pain, stress, disability, problems, hazards. It seems to me all of these are addressing either an issue or a problem. The next grouping, when I'm having comfort and security ratings, technique, demands, prevention, risk, these all seem to me about some form of analysis. And then my final column, where I have nurses, nursing, or nursing systems, these seem to be focusing on a population. And so then I have an idea of how I might want to think about the actual types of keywords and the ways in which the authors who are publishing peer-reviewed evidence are listing their keywords, the important points that will link you towards their articles. I can take this one step further, and then I can start to say, if I look in each one of these columns, where do I see consistency? So if I look in this first column, which I called process, then I can see that the word repositioning occurs 4 times. Actually, if I do include the word patient, it's 3, but for the sake of actual looking at the maximum use, I can say that repositioning is used 4 out of 10 times. Patient transfer 2 out of 10, patient handling 2 out of 10. So when I'm looking at the process that's being done, these are the most commonly used keywords. I didn't see much consistency in the tools, and so I didn't categorize these because there's no point if everything's not going to be used repeatedly. The only duplication really is EMG, which is in here twice. and so I didn't find this particularly useful, and I thought best not to include it. When I looked at issues and problems, the word disorder was used 5 out of 10 times. MSK disorders, or musculoskeletal disorders, was used 4 out of 10 times. Back pain, stress, problems or disorders were 4 out of 10, and work was used 3 out of 10. And so once again, if I'm looking at finding key terms that are going to help me locate these articles, these are keywords that are going to be very valuable. And in terms of the population, what I found so far was 5 out of 10 of the articles used nurses or nursing. However, no other variation was presented. It was either nurses, nursing, or no population at all. Therefore, we would probably want to consider that this is an important population to look at. I've now got a sense of the date range which articles are being published in, a broad sense of the keywords, some groupings of the themes of the keywords that people choose to present. And remember, you don't have to choose any of these. These are just my way of looking at what people are finding important in this area. And then within those subsections, I have this frequency table telling me what key terms are used most often in the articles I found as part of my soft search. So it really gives me a nice evidence base to justify the search terms that I'm going to work with. To move on from this point, then I need to really stop and think exactly what is it I'm looking for. Because remember, a soft search is when we've got an idea that we first think that could make a good review, or maybe a review is needed in that area. We need to go and find now if there is evidence to report, to review, to actually present. And so after we've found out that there is articles, there is evidence that are published in this area, we need to sit back and think, what is it we're actually looking for? And once we get a strong sense of what we want to review, we need to think, is there anything which has not been covered or represented by the keywords that we've found and put into our keyword table, our frequency table? We need to develop specific review question aims and objectives so that we know exactly what we're going to try and achieve with our review. And once we've done that, we need to look back at the review question aims and objectives and see whether any additional search terms would be required to answer that question, aim and objectives that are not included in what we've developed so far. Remember, there may be a time when you are going to need to include a search term that's not been used elsewhere because it's specific to what you're trying to achieve. But by including a soft search and looking at the keywords that are presented underneath the abstracts in peer-reviewed evidence, we can start to get a sense about what would be a particularly effective research term for our own reviews.